First up, we have a presentation from BPH Energy, ASX code BPH. BPH has a market cap of approximately 20 million. BPH is a diversified company holding investments in biotechnology and resources. BPH holds a significant interest in unlisted oil and gas exploration company Advent Energy Limited. Presenting today is Managing Director and Executive Chairman David Breeze. David, welcome back to the network, and please take it away.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak. Advent BPH has investments in three areas: Advent Energy, clean hydrogen technologies, and medtech in cortical dynamics. I'll focus primarily on Advent Energy. Next slide, please. Very topical at the moment, and yesterday AEMO issued a market warning on a gas shortage for the entire east coast of Australia, and that market warning is running from June 19th or 20th right out to the end of September, and it notifies a risk of shortfall of gas supply into South Australia, Victoria, Tasmania, ACT and New South Wales. And that's why Minister King issued the Future Gas Strategy paper in 23, when she did so, that she said if you cut gas, you fuel poverty. And that's precisely the risk that we're sitting in at the moment in the East Coast energy market. Gas prices went to $30 a gigajoule yesterday in the southern states. I think that was Victoria. And of course, what we have is the renewables went from 20% into the system down to 2% as a result of the lack of wind and lack of sun as a result of the cold weather. We really do have a significant issue, and that was recognised by the Prime Minister this morning when he said we need more gas supply out of the east coast of Australia. So I'll move to the next slide, please. Strategy paper was produced. It said gas must remain affordable for Australian users, and new sources of gas supply are needed to meet demand during the economy-wide transition, and gas remains crucial to our economy and to support the energy transition to net zero. So we need those sources at the right time, in the right place, and at the lowest cost. If we can go to the next slide, please. So this is from the Future Gas Strategy paper, and it shows the Sydney Basin as a proven gas basin, and it is in fact connected to the pipeline network, and that's part of the proximity. Next slide, please. This one really shows the importance of, or the potential importance of PEP11. Victoria has produced over 6 TCF of gas, around 6,000 petajoules, over the last 60 years from the resources in the Bass Strait. That's going through a drop-off in production, and about 20% at least of that drop-off in production has occurred this year. And that's that 50% reduction in supply capacity is really starting to impact in the eastern states in the gas supply market. You can see PEP11 there, together with the Santos Narrabri project, or one of only 2 projects in New South Wales that have the capacity. And the real key to understanding that is the importance of those 2 projects is the pipelines from the north up in Queensland were running at 106% of capacity yesterday, trying to keep the gas supply into the southern states. So that brings me back to talking more about PEP11, and it shows the relative importance of PEP11 potentially. Because PEP11, of course, has a 5.7 prospective recoverable resource in the independent report. If I can just move to the next slide, please. So Energy Quest produced a several papers, one of which was produced at the Energy Conference, AEP, just during May, but this article appeared in the Australian just a few days ago. And Australia must develop a plan B to head off a looming gas shortfall. The gas shortfall could emerge as early as next year. It's now happened. And otherwise, there'll be a deep structural deficit present in 2028. We haven't been addressing the market in the appropriate way, and that's what they're saying is now needed. And we need to bolster eastern seaboard gas supplies. And LNG is not going to be the solution because, as they've said and others have said LNG imports are going to be coming in at somewhere in the range of $15 to $20 a gigajoule. That doesn't work for manufacturing and it doesn't work for households. Next slide, please. We've now had 6 or 7 closures as a result of gas supply issues, and that amounts to several thousand jobs, but it's a major hit to the industrial process capacity of Australia, and that includes fertilisers, explosives and plastics. If we can move to the next slide, please. Our turquoise hydrogen is converting methane gas into hydrogen and clean carbon. That is in carbon nanotubes. The carbon nanotubes have unusual mechanical properties and they act as a toughening agent, high tensile strength and greater conductivity. We're now looking to take that into commercial production during this year and we're raising capital to do so. Next slide, please. Cortical dynamics, again, we're looking to move that project into commercial sales during this next year. We've got through a generation 1 and we're going through a process to have generation 2 approved by the market authorities. We already have FDA, CE, TGA and KMFD approvals on a global basis. If we can move to the next slide, please. And I'll go through these last few slides quickly. The future gas strategy said that it was going to be an 800 petajoule per year shortfall out into 2034. Starting in 26-27, that's already occurring. Next slide, please. In context, that amounts to the total gas consumed by both domestic and commercial users in Queensland, Victoria, New South Wales, Northern Territory and South Australia. Next slide, please. The AEMO has put out an ISP and gas-fired power as the backup to renewables is going to increase from 10 to 16 gigawatts by 2050. And so peak demand for gas is going to continue to increase. Next slide, please. We look at a global LNG, it is not reasonable to rely on imports of LNG. The top line, the red dotted line, shows the demand and the green and black show supply. Again, what that's showing is that huge supply gap emerging as we move forward into this energy transition as gas is used more as backup. Next slide, please. As I've said, the pipeline network which comes down into New South Wales does not allow for an easy upgrade to power supply, and Northern Territory has its own problems at the moment in terms of energy supply. In fact, the Northern Territory government yesterday or this week signed a new supply network, but each of these problems is taking away from gas LNG exports, and other countries like Japan, China, Korea, Singapore are relying on Australian gas, and they're covered both by international trade agreements and by LNG exports contracts. Next slide, please. So what we have in PEP 11, as I've said, is around 5.7 TCF as a prospective resource. gas-powered systems are being put into New South Wales and more are needed, and carbon storage is part of what may be possible in the offshore area, and we'll investigate that. Next slide, please. This is, as was shown in the 1990s when Santos and Amplex had the area, through the analysis of the vitrinite maturity, the model results in all of the late Permian coal measures being in the gas window. So it's a gas project. Next slide, please. In New South Wales, 300,000 jobs rely on gas supply. Across Australia, 5 million homes rely on gas supply, and gas supplies 1.3 million households and 33,000 businesses in New South Wales. We must fix this issue, and Australia has a problem, and now everyone is recognising that issue. Next slide, please. And that's the disclaimer, and thank you, and that's, I think, right on time, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Yes, you are right on time, David. Thank you for that. Okay, there's a lot of questions, and as you can imagine, mostly around PEP 11. Let me start with this one. Do you have any short-term legal action against the New South Wales state government for stalling the PEP 11 approval process relative to federal approval?
I can't comment on that except in one aspect. Professor Toomey, when she gave evidence to the inquiry that the New South Wales government had when this project was being discussed, said that it was likely that any legislation of that nature was likely to be in breach of Section 109, I think it is, of the Constitution. That would come into being at the commercialisation phase of the project. But again, I can't comment in reality on any current discussions on legal actions.
Understood. There is a question here from a shareholder asking if you have a plan B for the BPH OB options if the government doesn't issue the permit.
Again, because of matters to do with the way in which law applies in this, I can't comment on any matter in relation to that at the moment.
Okay, well, a lot of the questions obviously coming in are around some of those legal challenges. So we're probably not going to be able to ask you a question you can answer based on what's coming through. But I will say one thing: the strategy paper that has come out has certainly focused attention again on, and as you've rightly pointed out, only yesterday, warnings about potential gas shortages. So it's playing out, it's happening, what we've always thought was going to happen. How do you think the coalition's now position on nuclear can impact on East Coast gas and BPH in particular?
Listening to the public commentaries made by Mr. Dutton and by Taylor and by the Nationals leader, they have all made it clear that gas is a key part of the energy transition, and we're seeing that play out in Victoria. When you look at Victoria, they used more gas in the last few days of June than they did in all of last year during the winter, and that was for fired backup. The Energy Minister in Victoria has now, in her public statement, said, yes, we do need gas as part of the energy transition. So, in fact, what we really have here is both sides of government saying that gas is a key part of the energy transition, and both sides are saying that gas will be needed right through to 2050, even with the circumstances of either A, renewables, or B, nuclear. And I think that's fundamentally clear from the statements that have been made by politicians on both sides.
Understood. All right, David, thank you again for your time today, and we hope to get you back soon. Until then, have a great weekend. Thank you again.
Thanks indeed, and thanks for the opportunity.